so finally, there's going to be a single message that's conveyed from the stage. There's a few of us here, a few of us in the room. We're all the singles at. A couple of us, right? And all of us used to be single. So God saved me from marriage. And I know that sounds weird, right? Like, what is a single person doing on stage at a marriage conference talking about God saved me from marriage? But that's actually my story. That's the reality of my journey, is God actually did save me from marriage. So let me break it down and articulate what I mean by that. So many of us as young girls, we grow up with what I like to call a Disney mirage, right? We grow up and we watch these animated movies and these characters on a screen that are like living this most fabulous life, and they're, you know, skipping off into the sunset. And sometimes you think about this mirage that you see on TV and you're like, I want that to be my life, right? But what girl in her right mind goes and falls in love with this spooky, scary looking creature who lives in a big dungeon and says, this is gonna be my husband, right? And then how many poor girls do you know that actually marry a prince? How often does that happen? It happened, okay, it happened, right? So oftentimes when we're growing up, we think about what we want our lives to be, and we look at it on TV, or we look at it, you know, in other commercials and the like. And then we have pop culture, right? And pop culture often looks a hot mess, because we got a housewives show for every major city, right? So we got the Housewives of Atlanta, the Housewives of Orange County, of Beverly Hills, of New York City. There's a Housewives show for every major city. They probably got one in Annapolis, one in PG County. And so when you put these shows next to what you see in Disney movies, and then you couple that with what you see growing up in your family. And we talked about blended families earlier. We talked about single parents and what that's like being a single parent. So we have all of these different mixed messages. Just mixed signals firing at you from every way. Mixed signal here, mixed signal there. And then if you're like me, you're a single Christian woman in church, and then you see most of the messages and the things that are conveyed from the pulpit are often geared toward married couples, right? Because usually the minister's married, and so they're speaking from their perspective, but single women just want to know two things, really, is what we want to know. Is how to be successfully single in our journey, and then what is it like to prepare yourself for marriage? And so here I am, a very single Christian woman in my early 20s, and I'm just trying to figure all this out, but I need medication and therapy because I'm like, I don't know, am I a Disney princess? Oh wait, maybe I'm a housewife. Or wait, maybe I'm gonna be a hip hop star, right? And so you're just confused. It's like you have these multiple personalities that you're trying to reconcile. And so I find myself, because I'm trying to make sense of all this, in one toxic relationship after the next. So I find myself into, you know, relationships with people who I never imagined I would be in relationships with. And that's my truth, right? So I meet the sugar daddy, you know, and he's laying it on me and lavishing me with gifts. And I'm like, okay, well, this is cool. And then, you know, there's the mental health debacle. And I'm like, wow, this person really has mental health challenges, but I don't know any better because I've never experienced this before. And then there's the love triangle, or maybe it was a quadrangle at the time, I don't know, somebody popping out of the woodworks here and popping out of the woodworks there. And then even the married man, right? And so here I am again, I'm trying to find my identity in these relationships because I have all of these mixed signals, and I don't quite know where to fit in. There's a cesspool here, it looks slippery, but it looks good, so here I am trying to dip my toe in that. And so when you try and find your identity and your purpose in relationships or in marriage, you find yourself depleting your partner, but also depleting that relationship. And so I didn't know how to make sense of my identity outside of a relationship, because I thought that was the most important and most valuable thing, because that's what I saw on TV. It's what I saw from the pulpit. It's what I saw all around me, right? And so finally, I had a reckoning and an awareness of the most important thing that really, this construct changed my life. And some people might find this controversial, but this really, really changed my life, and it gave me new awareness. And the concept is finding your purpose is more important than finding your spouse. Why don't they tell you that as a single person? Because all you see often is, again, these images of marriage and finding relationships, and everyone, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes people like they're living their best life when they're married. But you don't know what it took to get there, right? And so as singles, we often skip that step of pursuing purpose. So when I say God saved me from marriage, it's because he saved me from marrying the wrong man at the wrong time, because my view of marriage was wrong. I mean, how many times do you hear divorcees say, well, you know, we married too young, or we fell out of love, or, you know, we were never the right fit, right? But by that point, you could have already identified your purpose and figured all that out. And so here I am getting ready to turn 40, and I'm finally learning these valuable lessons for life, which is good, right? It's good. So I'm taking my own path toward marriage. It might be a little extended, but I've learned a lot in the process, even though I've kind of had a schizophrenic journey along the way. And so when I think about singles, and I wrote a book called The Single Woman's Blueprint, which is really a testimony of my own journey in singleness and how God began to reshape my identity and give me purpose in and of myself and feeling validated just as a woman. But it took me a little while to get there. So when I have these conversations with singles, I try and help them to recognize 5 things. And I think even as married people, these are 5 things that you can take away. So the first thing is to really just accept God's love and accept who you are and who he created you to be. And I often see people in marriages who, even though they're married, they may not truly be happy in marriage because, again, people are trying to find their identity in something external to who they are, when really God, his love is really all we need. And so recognizing and accepting that you're validated by nothing other than being a child of God. And then the second thing is to recover, right? Because when you go through trauma or when you come out of bad relationships, and I told you I was in many toxic relationships, you need time just to press pause. Someone once told me the best way to get over a man is to do what? Get under another one? What kind of advice is that? The best way to get over a man is to get under a new one? Like, what kind of advice is that? It's not like my grandmother was telling me that, but that's advice that I would get from sister friends. And that is a hot mess, because there you are, you're completely ruining yourself even more. And so, accept God's love. Number one, the second thing I wanted to say, the second is recover. The third is to forgive yourself and to forgive other people. And so when I have conversations with single people, it's like, you need to let that person go. Because the only thing that you're doing is when you harbor unforgiveness, is you're kind of carrying around this dead weight. And everywhere you go, you're taking Andre with you. So if you haven't forgiven Andre, he's going with you into the shower, right? As a dead weight. He's going with you to your work, he's going with you to the grocery store, he's going with you into that new relationship. So here you are carrying Andre because you haven't let him go, and he's got married, he ain't thinking about you. And so when I say forgive, it's setting you free, not that other person. And so the other thing I tell them is to identify your purpose. What is that thing that God created you for? Miles Monroe once said that God needed something done that made you necessary. Right? So why are you necessary? Like, even if you're married in your marriage, why are you necessary in that marriage, and why are you necessary in the world? So identify your purpose and then chase your dream. So once you figure out and understand and recognize why God created you, put that thing into motion. Right? Like, so many people here are living and walking out their purpose. I love the single parents organization that you created, and I'd love to be a part. Okay, and tap into that, because oftentimes you build your dream based on your testimony and based on your purpose. And so just spend time executing that. So just to wrap things up, finding your purpose is more important than finding your spouse. And that's in the Bible. A lot of people talked about Genesis chapter 1, right? What happens when God creates man? And in Genesis 1, going back to that, God placed Adam in the garden before he gave him Eve. So he put him to work before his wife came along, right? And then if you look at the book of Ruth, Ruth was found doing what? Working. She was found leaning in the field, serving her mother-in-law before